We used to go to any place where we could sit for free, and we used to eat the cheapest idlis every day.
When did you really feel that bhai ye to chal pada, like this is now, there is nothing too much that can go wrong, I think this is going to work?
तो कभी नहीं
When
लगा
was that?
मुझे. तो
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of FinTech Ki Baat Dil Se. In today's episode, we have with us Mr. Rajat Deshpande, founder and CEO of FinBox. Hey Rajat, thank you so much for joining us today.
thank you for having me, Shreyas.
It's a pleasure, Rajat. So Rajat essentially has almost a decade's worth of experience in the financial service industry and across multiple domains. And I think he has been running FinBox for more than 6 years now, and very successfully built multiple products into embedded finance, personal finance, and so on. So, Rajat, we would love to hear about your journey. Let's start at the top, right? Let's take us a bit through your career journey. How was it like, and then kind of what inspired you to build FinBox?
Right. So, thank you so much. A little bit about me. I graduated in 2009 as a mechanical engineer from IIT Bombay. And then I worked across analytics, and then became a quant at Citigroup on the trading desk side. Then I sort of quit that job and dove headfirst into the startup space. Became a product manager in an e-commerce company in Gurgaon called healthcart.com. And then from there on, tried building FinBox as a consumer company first, and then sort of shut that down, then revisited it in the B2B avatar that we see it in now as well. So
Interesting.
that's been my journey per se.
Perfect. Sounds amazing. I think at some point of time, I would love to visit the pivot from B2C to B2B. I think that's super interesting as well. Having said that, right, let's start off with what inspired you to take the plunge and become an entrepreneur, right? ऐसा क्या हो गया कि वो like कि ठीक है job वगैरह सब अच्छा चल रहा है, and since you were from IIT, I think you probably be in a pretty decent job, right? And then you were like कि नहीं यार ये सब मजा नहीं यार, अभी कुछ adventure करते हैं, let's do something of our own. So what was that inspired you?
So I don't know if there was like real inspiration in a sense, right? So I would say that it is more of an ache than an inspiration. Basically, an idea just consumes you, then it just forces your hand in doing a sort of 24/7 thinking about it, right? So basically, I understood entrepreneurship, or some of that was happening when I realized, that Ola had come out from, one of my batchmates, and I was at City at that time, and I was like, I was like, this is interesting, and some people just can build something from scratch. And finance essentially is it is a narrow lane. So this is it is a very well defined role typically that you are doing, and being creative is not part of in a way on the market side, on the trading desk. You trade what the products are, and you do it in the same way, right? So there was an ache of breaking out, but I didn't know per se how it will sort of I didn't know if that ache was starting a company or maybe doing something on my own. It didn't have a proper form. But what I did, one of my friends advised me to volunteer for a startup to understand what it was. So there was this startup called bookmycab.com in Mumbai, which was also one of IIT Bombay seniors was running it, and Ola had already started, and they were doing massively well, and these guys didn't have an Android app, and I didn't know anything about coding or Android or any of those things, but I thought maybe I can figure it out and build it. So I figured out, and I coded in the Android app, and it worked and all that, and they could launch, and they saw some traction, and I realized that maybe I had some skill sets outside the stuff that we were already I was doing at City Group, and that is when I thought,
Right.
I will sort of quit City, and I quit, and then I sort of put out my need to get a job. So one of my friends referred me
Mm-hmm.
to Health Card, and I had a conversation, and it seemed
Mm-hmm.
so the ecosystem was so early in mobile that there was nobody who was an expert in mobile apps or knew how to think about it, etc. And by the short stint that I
Right.
had of building it on my own, even though very rudimentary, etc., I had somewhat become an expert in the
Mm-hmm.
field in a way.
I think that makes sense. Having said that, right, I think a couple of interesting points that I noticed that I think a lot of budding entrepreneurs either get stuck at or kind of struggle, right? One is when you leave your job to get into entrepreneurship, what was the safety net? I get this question a lot from budding entrepreneurs. यार आप इतना entrepreneur से बात करते हो, and a lot of them said idea आया, अच्छा लगा, it was consuming me, and I left the job and started building it. But what kept your house going? What kept you well fed and sheltered? So what was the safety net?
Oh,
What was the backup plan?
there was no safety net, thankfully. I had, like, I think some 7-8 lakh rupees saved up. These, the
Acha.
Srijan and Nikhil were fairly young, and I'm guessing that, less than a lakh rupees in their bank account. Now, but I think, and we had this old Santro car, जिसमें I used to sort of come in the morning, pick them up. We used to go to, any place where we could sit for free, and we used to eat the cheapest idlis every day. I think
Acha.
I think one piece is key. If you think about it, humans need fairly very little in terms of being well fed.
Mm-hmm.
I think people start to get a little anxious about their future if their bank accounts start running lower. So I think
True.
it is a emotional state of being where you get more anxious because you are not succeeding as fast as you think, and also bank account is starting to run low. But actually it's not really becoming a problem. It's just that you are used to money coming in every month, wo nahi aa raha hai. But it
Right.
doesn't become a problem. It's a psychological thing, and I will frankly
Mm-hmm.
say that it didn't bother me at all, because one, I had great family support. So
Mm-hmm.
my wife is working, तो खाना तो खिला ही देती है, I'm sure. And nobody ever said कि don't do this or that. It's like 100% support. And I feel
बिल्कुल.
if we hadn't succeeded by the time we finished through the money, I think I would have borrowed the money and still continued for a bit at least.
Mm-hmm.
And another
Makes
piece
sense.
is that we were very we were sure we monetized very early on. So by
Acha.
month 3 we had revenues. So
Oh wow.
feeding was per se not a problem, I
Mm-hmm.
would say.
Got
But
it.
yeah, and I think we were very privileged to have a mindset of being very. I think the entire team is very resourceful. We could write our own code, we could do our own stuff,
Mm-hmm.
we had
Right.
we were joined by very early guys. The first guy is still with us, Devashish, if you're listening.
Oh
This,
wow.
yeah, so there we
That's
are like really privileged
uh
in the kind of people who sort of worked with us for this mission over time. Yeah.
definitely. I mean, having some of the first people with you even after 6 years in today's age is actually a rare thing. I mean, जिस हिसाब
Insane.
से
Yeah.
iteration चल रहा है industry में, I think
Yeah,
that's a
insane.
really good thing. Having said that, what is essentially one of the most frugal things that you have done in the early days of being a founder?
It's like frugally, there's a insane frugality, I will say. So interestingly, as I said, right, we there were no
Mm-hmm.
salaries. There were only idlis that I was feeding folks for lunch and dinner. That's it for, like, the early guys also. Interestingly, we didn't have an
That's right.
office. We didn't want to pay for our workspace. So there used to be in
Mm-hmm.
Domblur, this place called Axis Bank Thought Factory. So one day we went there
That's
for
right.
some event, and we realized कि they had a room, temporary room outside their co-working space, where you could just sit for a bit if you had come for an event. So we realized nobody was checking
Okay.
कि कौन बैठ सकता है. So then we started to go there, and people started to think that it was our room. So other startup used to, some of the stuff, people were there whenever if we came late, people just used to leave the room. So people thought that is the FinBox room. They've like occupied our office space for free. So they're like, okay, let's just invite them in for a presentation. If they are okay, we will actually incubate them. So we gave a presentation, and we made a video and stuff, which was embedded finance, by the way. So one day we will put that out for people to see that we said this in 2017, 18 in a little bit of a different form, but yeah. And interestingly, they were like, ye to sahi lag raha hai. So they, brought us into the co-working space. And then we applied for PayPal. Then PayPal gave us our, when Axis Bank, was ending its program, we went to PayPal office. So we were always like scavenging for freebies, and we got a lot of credits from AWS by getting to know them, and some of the guys who sort of liked us.
Amazing.
So all of that, right? So I think if we hadn't done that, we wouldn't be here. So insane stuff, I feel.
No, I think this the mentality of frugality, resourcefulness, and the scavenging piece is really important for early stage founders, and a lot of people get caught up in I don't know what to term it as, but they get caught up in that sentiment कि नहीं मैं तो कर लूंगा या they end up paying for things that they could have gotten for free and all of that, and ultimately that essentially leads to the downfall. And I think I've seen that a few times, and I think this kind of story should be out there more. I think it's really inspiring, and hopefully a few other people will get ideas.
No, absolutely. And one thing was that none of us were coders at that point. So people were like, we should maybe find somebody and pay them to build the product. But we actually learned, all of engineering that was needed, from writing the Android SDK to building a very high performance data pipeline. All of the stuff we learned to build it in the first 3 months, right? And there's still a lot of code, at least not mine, but my co-founders, Vijay and Nikhil, code still runs a lot of interesting pieces of our software, right? So I feel if you need money to iterate on your product, right, then so it is going to be a painful journey, because you are always scared, and it never works out in the first go. Maybe you think it will work out, but maybe the 10th iteration works out. So you will never have the money or resources. You could get lucky if you get funding, etc. But it's not a sure shot that you will not burn out in between.
Oh, definitely. Makes sense. Having said that, right, let's take a step back. I normally don't really get into this part of the thing, but what kind of, this is obviously a very obvious pattern in the industry. A lot of people from the IITs, specifically Bombay's and Delhi's, are into the entrepreneurship space, and I've seen a lot of fintech founders also from there. So ऐसा क्या है वहाँ की मिट्टी में that a lot of people are turning into entrepreneurs even today, like in a few events. There was an event yesterday night, a fintech happy hour kind of a thing, and I saw at least 3-4 freshers from these institutes who are like, हम fintech बना रहे हैं, हम ये कर रहे हैं, and some or the other way I think they'll make it. पता है कि कुछ ना कुछ तो उखाड़ लेंगे. So what is it that differentiates and makes good entrepreneurs from these organizations?
Difficult. I think one piece is that, when you see some of your peers do it, you are like, I think there's a network effect in a way. Network nahi, but it's like you, as you are part of a community, you feel that if, others can do it, why can't you do it, right? So there's no doubt, as if one is like there is a path in a way to already set up, and that some folks from your community have already succeeded. So it's not that
Right.
It is not that difficult for you to imagine ki, I can also do it. I think that's one.
Hmm.
Now, of course, there is a lot of networking that is also happening, right? So there are so many groups. So there's like IITB founders,
Right.
IITB fintech founders. These are WhatsApp communities that I am part of. So people can ask questions that
Hmm.
were very hard to get answers to in the early days, right? Even a couple of years ago.
Hmm.
And third thing is
Right.
ki, generally, um, the I
Hmm.
would say if you are from IT, you typically are not scared about roti kapda type stuff. You're like ki, you can go
True.
for the big kill typically more easily, because how low are you going to fall in your career, right? So and also now there is a
Exactly.
lot of exposure early on in your sort of during your engineering days, right? So for example, internship programs,
Hmm.
etc. A lot of startups have internship programs from their alma mater. So for example, we get a
Right.
lot of guys from IIT Kharagpur because our founders are from IIT Kharagpur, the two guys, and there's a steady stream of people. They come, interact, they sort of talk in house and sort of give them information. But per se, I would say these are,
Understood.
there is no fundamental reason. मिट्टी में मुझे नहीं लगता कुछ है, बस लोगों की बातों में है ज्यादा.
Bilkul. So, been almost 6 years now, but when did you really feel that, bhai, ye to chal pada, like this is now there is nothing too much that can go wrong. I think this is going to work.
तो कभी नहीं
When
लगा
was that?
मुझे. तो no, and that's serious. See,
Interesting. Mhm.
startup is a very, very
Uh-huh.
unstable equilibrium. It's a function of the right people,
True.
right market, if you are building in the right direction at the right time. If you have enough
Mhm.
intensity, sometimes you have to trade off breadth versus depth if you are making the right decisions. Um,
Bilkul.
बहुत कुछ है, and I wouldn't say कि at least अभी भी I feel कि चल पड़ा है. One piece is that there is
Acha.
definitely cushion since we've raised money and all that. तो एक
Mhm.
दो बार गिरे भी तो मरेंगे नहीं, but हम लोग बहुत बार मरते मरते बचे हैं, मतलब because we were revenue fed.
Acha.
हमारे invoices stuck हो गए, उधार लेके हमने लोगों की सैलरियां भरी, कुछ भी हो जाता था. But I will say, even from the start, right,
Acha.
our focus was getting revenue. The first contract that we signed, enterprise contract, almost having a beta product, was worth 10 crore rupees with 2.5 crores prepaid. So
Wow.
मतलब वो पैसा जब आया
Mhm.
तब हो गया कि अरे अब तो क्या होगा, मतलब करो जो करना है. एंड फिर
Right.
भी इतना, मतलब those are things that make it very
Mhm.
interesting. They give you like a big confidence to keep going.
Bilkul.
पर मुझे यही लगता है कि the most important is if the founding team has determination and has left emotional fuel is left, तो हो जाएगा. The day people get tired, is the day that the downfall starts. So we've seen, for example, at
Bilkul.
the 5th, 6th year, people sort of tend to start thinking about exits, या फिर they sort of, a lot of companies sell to other companies. तो ये सब हो जाता है
Mhm.
because mostly we feel founders get tired. And हम लोगों के
Right.
साथ तो नहीं है ऐसा. We are very like gung ho कि अभी तो बहुत बचा है. There is a lot of action.
That's
So
great.
those
That's
are
good to
things.
hear. Bilkul.
That's where it is. But
Mhm.
you can stumble and fall and die very easily. It's not. तो बहुत
Definitely.
सारे, मैं तो इनफैक्ट आई आस्क फाउंडर्स कि हाउ डू यू डील विद दिस, कि एक दिन लगता है कि क्या हम लोग बहुत ही अच्छा कर रहे हैं, वी आर डूइंग लाइक द बेस्ट, हम मचा रहे हैं, हम बहुत ही, वी आर द स्मार्टेस्ट
Right.
पीपल अराउंड. नेक्स्ट डे यू टर्न अराउंड, इट्स लाइक कि हम तो वी आर द वर्स्ट, हमें कुछ समझ नहीं आता. देयर इज दिस रोलर कोस्टर, अब तो हम मरने ही वाले हैं. कहाँ
True.
जाएंगे? That kind of feeling is like an everyday seesaw roller coaster feeling. वो रोज होता है. Sometimes you
Bilkul.
swell with
Bilkul.
pride, sometimes you're like कि क्या हो गया. तो never,
Right.
it's just weird. And I think a lot of people, especially family members, that sort of, they don't understand the kind of
Mhm.
emotions that we've gotten used to. कि बहुत सारी
True.
problems जो are sort of used to be large problems from their vantage point or also large problems seem very like इसमें क्या है बहुत फर्क है. So those are things that we've sort of gotten used to,
Understood.
desensitized to problems, I feel.
बिल्कुल. And I'm glad you brought that up. This like ये सब जो emotional roller coaster है, जो seesaw है, it's a constant part of being a founder for like 6 years से you're going through this, right? So how do you stay sane? How do you like wake up and you're like still focused कि करना है ये, and how are you still like in the right mental health? Like what's the mantra over there?
There's no mantra, it's just we are exceedingly stubborn, and I think all founders need to be, because if you think
बिल्कुल.
about it, you get a lot of punches in your gut. So I'll give you an example. For example, if there is some deal outside happening in like your nearby sector, so investors will come, try to dig up information, draw comps, judge you against the company that they are. And now you, after doing it so many times, you understand this and you feel judged and maybe also used sometimes. And you're like, "Arey, why is this happening?" and all that. But you get sort of, and it used to bum us out, and you're like, let's just not talk to these folks. But then we were like, nahi, this also serves the ecosystem in some way. Kabhi hum, when they are evaluating us, they will also go talk to other folks, etc. Maybe it's a overall service to the ecosystem. So koi baat nahi, even if this doesn't feel right, let's just engage, and jitni information we want to give, we should give in a controlled manner. So that's what we do today. But we do also come out and tell investors ki yaar, let's just try to make it worthwhile for both. कि आप भी कुछ बताओ, हम भी कुछ बताते हैं. There are some guys who are like कि they want to just bring out their laptops and just keep noting. अच्छा कितना revenue है ये वो. I'm like कि don't.
Makes sense. Having said that, coming to the last and final question of this segment, founder story. What is the biggest mistake that you have kind of ever made as a part of FinBox or as a founder, and like how did you recoup and recover from that?
So we've made like huge blunders and we have not recouped. So from a strategic perspective, there are in B2B there are two kinds of mistakes that you can make from product perspective. One is building products that nobody wants, and one is stopping products which everybody might want. Right, so there are a bunch of products that we were fairly early in and we saw around the corner, but we didn't pursue, and these became very large markets. And there are certain things that we continued for a long time which were a drain on our resources. We didn't shut down in time. So some of that, I will say, is fairly, stuff that we lament about also internally. And as we say, right, one of the things that we are being taught by by our journey is how do you make great decisions with imperfect knowledge, right? And what we are trying to do is refine our thinking with our experience, on how it works for us. And I will say, you have to take this in your stride and use your experience to make better decisions, better bets in the future. But there are a bunch, these are some things that are close to us, I will say, which are strategic directions, especially when should you expand to say Southeast Asia that we are doing now. We feel we are late. So some of these things are things that you deal with, but these are mistakes, I will say, that we made in hindsight. But yeah, these keep happening. We can't prevent any of this.
Understood. No, makes sense. And I promise this is the last question. What are like 3 key don'ts for budding entrepreneurs that you'd like to warn them or advise them about?
Okay. Number one, as I say to people, don't outsource your product. So I meet a lot of people who are like, I'm building this, that. but I don't have an engineer, or
Right.
the engineer is not part of my founding team. I have this services company, or I've contracted this out. No, don't do that.
Right.
There's a bunch of folks. It's I know for business people starting out, this is a big problem, but I think the first thing they should do is have a technical
True.
co-founder. I think second is don't have imbalanced teams in a way, right? If you have like ultra junior members in the team who don't have enough buy-in into the team, in the founding team who sort of, you've said ki, okay, I own
Right.
98% of the company, you own 2%, I am like very experienced, you are very whatever. The thing is
Right.
that
Right.
whatever is your experiences, etc., whatever you are bringing to the table, 99.99% of your journey is in front of you. And you
True.
are betting on that the other guy is going to pull through their weight and become much 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 bigger as a contributor. Matlab, you will not want them to
Right.
put in 2% effort, right? So don't do that. So
Right.
avoid this kind
Makes
of
sense.
conflict early on, because a lot of companies just break up because there is founder conflict, right? I will say
True.
third is no, if you are what you are made of. I will say don't build a B2C startup if you are a B2B type team. Right? If you care about money in the bank, you are
Right.
not, you are more sort of, there are people who are B2B people, there are people who are B2C people. So just don't get excited about the other side,
Right.
right? And I will say just find your
Makes
fit.
sense.
So what we say is founder market fit is very important. Product market fit to aa jayega, but if you're trying to do something that you just fancy generally and you are not made for it, I won't say you have any chance in hell to succeed.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Perfect. I think this was really an insightful conversation, Rajat. Thank you so much for your time. We'll move on to the next segment, Dandi ki baat, shortly.
Super.